Chemical drum explosion. On March 12, 2019, Marcus Klein, 38, a chemical technician in Ludwigshafen, Germany, started his shift inspecting solvent drums in the production area. One drum, labeled safe, had been improperly mixed the previous day, creating unstable chemical compounds. Marcus removed the lid and the contents began to bubble violently. The drum rapidly pressurized and the lid popped upward, striking nearby piping before tipping sideways. Liquid chemicals spilled across the floor and the drum itself slid, pinning Marcus against a steel shelf. The chemicals reacted violently with each other, producing a rapid flare-up and sharp bursts of heat. Within seconds, the mixture ignited, causing shrapnel from the metal drum to fly across the workstation. Marcus was trapped between the drum and the shelf, his movements restricted by both weight and the vicious chemical sludge. Attempts to free him failed immediately. The force and chemical burns were fatal. Emergency responders arrived but could only confirm that Marcus had died instantly. Investigators found that the incident was triggered by a labeling error combined with a lack of proper handling protocols. The accident demonstrates how one mismanaged container in a chemical factory can escalate into an explosive, fatal event in seconds. Conveyor belt entanglement. On September 4, 2020, Ravi Patel, 27, a textile operator in Surat, India, was performing routine maintenance on a high-speed conveyor when a sheet of fabric jammed in the rollers. Leaning over to clear the obstruction, his loose sleeve was immediately grabbed. The rollers pinched the fabric and pulled his arm and torso forward with immense force. As the belt continued to move, Ravi's body was dragged into the narrow gap between the conveyor frame and rollers. The belt's full speed twisted him unnaturally, crushing his chest against the metallic frame while his legs were forced into the conveyor edges. The design of the machine amplified the mechanical pressure. One roller compressed his shoulder while the next twisted his torso. Every second increased the fatal pressure and torsion on his body. The belt did not stop automatically because emergency interlocks had been disabled earlier in the day. Attempts to halt the system manually were delayed by the tight spacing and the conveyor's momentum. By the time the machinery stopped, Ravi had already suffered fatal crushing injuries. Safety investigators later revealed missing guards and repeated bypassing of emergency stop mechanisms. Metal press crush. On January 15, 2018, Jonathan Myers, 42, an auto assembly technician in Detroit, USA, was preparing to adjust a misaligned steel sheet on a hydraulic press. The safety interlocks had been disabled unbeknownst to him. As he reached into the press cavity, the ram descended suddenly. Jonathan's torso was pinned completely between the descending platen and the steel sheet. The hydraulic system maintained full pressure, bending the sheet and pressing it into his body. His arms were trapped at the sides, and the platen's downward force caused severe compression to his chest and ribcage. The metal frame slightly deformed under the extreme pressure, twisting his legs into unnatural positions. Emergency responders had to dismantle part of the machine to remove him, but the trauma was already fatal. Investigators later confirmed that repeated warnings about bypassing the safety interlocks had been ignored. Crane overhead load. On June 21, 2021, Lars Hendrickson, 35, a rigging operator in Rotterdam, Netherlands, was overseeing the placement of a heavy steel beam using a crane. As the beam was lifted, a critical clamp on the load loosened unnoticed. The beam shifted mid-air, its mass creating a sudden and rapid downward motion. Lars was positioned directly beneath the beam to check alignment. The beam struck him across the shoulders and chest, forcing him into the concrete floor. As it fell, the beam rotated, increasing the pressure on his torso and limbs. Lars was pinned under hundreds of kilograms of steel instantly, with crushing force distributed across his body. The clamp's failure was later traced to a fatigued shear pin that had not been replaced during recent inspections. Lars was fatally injured instantly, showing how a small mechanical oversight in an industrial environment can transform a normal lifting procedure into a deadly accident. Molten metal spill. On February 19, 2017, Sung-Ho Kim, 29, a foundry engineer in Ulsan, South Korea, was overseeing the controlled pouring of molten steel into molds in the high-temperature casting hall. The ladle holding the steel was mounted on a support system, and its hinge had been worn and weakened by repeated use without proper maintenance. As Sung-ho guided the ladle into position, the hinge suddenly gave way. The ladle tipped abruptly, and a torrent of molten steel surged across the platform. Sung-ho's legs and torso were immediately engulfed, pinned by the dense, searing metal. The flow continued to expand rapidly, following even the smallest gradient in the factory floor, spreading toward nearby machinery and workstations. His body was trapped under the molten stream, and he was fatally burned and crushed almost instantly. Investigators later determined that routine inspections had not identified the hinge wear, and that emergency containment procedures were insufficient to manage a spill of this magnitude. What should have been a routine casting process turned into a lethal accident in mere seconds, claiming Sung-ho's life and leaving an indelible mark on safety regulations in the plant. Textile machine entanglement. On November 3, 2022, Fatima Begum, 22, a fabric operator in Dhaka, Bangladesh, was operating a high-speed spinning drum used to wind large rolls of fabric. The drum rotated at extreme velocity, and Fatima leaned over to adjust the material feed. Her long hair caught in the rotating mechanism, instantly pulling her head, shoulders, and upper torso toward the drum. The machine's force twisted her arms and chest against the frame, compressing her body in multiple directions simultaneously. Each rotation pressed her further into the structure, making any attempt to free herself impossible. The drum's momentum carried her deeper into the mechanism, entangling her legs against rollers beneath the spinning drum. Protective guards had been removed for speed adjustments, and the machine's speed setting was higher than manufacturer recommendations. Fatima was fatally trapped in the mechanism, her death occurring instantly. Inspectors later cited unsafe machine guarding and improper machine settings. A routine adjustment turned lethal due to the machine's mechanical power.